Stop me if you've heard this one before. If I was in a zombie apocalypse, man, I'd go to a shopping mall because there's supplies and blah blah blah. People have this weird obsession with zombies these days, and in 2015, it's more than a little played out. Let's be honest here, if the zombie apocalypse was real, most of us would get wiped out. You don't think you will because you've watched all those movies and played the games, but you would. You definitely would. Unless they're the kind from Zombies Ate My Neighbors. Then, you might stand a chance. Zombies Ate My Neighbors stars Zeke and Julie on a mission to save the neighbors in all 48 levels. Your neighbors consist of the same folks, a guy who loves to grill, a guy who loves to float in his pool, a girl who loves to jump on a trampoline, a couple who loves to be tourists, cheerleaders, babies, soldiers, and this teacher that's giving you an F-. All the time. You know what, never mind, you zombies can have her. Despite most levels being short bursts, Zombies Ate My Neighbors is a surprisingly lengthy game and a difficult one at that. You'll encounter parodies of all kinds, from Tremors, Frankenstein, Child's Play, and Creature from the Black Lagoon, among many others. Visually, Zombies Ate My Neighbors is a stellar game. Every sprite is crisp and colorful, and it's easy to tell exactly what LucasArts was going for. Of course, I have the Genesis version because, well, it's what I've got, but the Super Nintendo version looks much, much better. Blast processing doesn't get you near as far when all you need is color. At the same time, Zombies Ate My Neighbors is a top-down game, and because of this, problems can arise. As with any game of this style, it can be difficult to tell what plane your character is on and where the enemies are as well in correlation. There's a lot of moments in Zombies Ate My Neighbors that fleeing is a better idea than fighting, and the fourth level hammers that home pretty well. Being unable to tell where Royd Leatherface and his brothers are in relation to you is crucial and sometimes stressful. On that note though, it's the good kind of stress, because it's rare that it ever feels unfair, at least telling where you're standing versus the enemies, though your bullets or weapons may miss your target occasionally. While level 4 looks like a living nightmare, it's actually crazy fun to manipulate these guys into chopping through the hedge mazes and using them as ghosts in a human version of Pac-Man. Beyond that is the sound. Again, this is another area that the Super Nintendo excels at, but even on the Genesis, the music is catchy and fits the overall tone of the game. Weird, definitely, but fitting all the same. It's a bit eerie, too, with how the clown laughs are interspersed as instruments. I usually don't have much to say about the sound effects, but Zombies is worth mentioning. Mainly because this is where enemies get their creep factor from what would otherwise be a goofy game. For instance, the Chucky dolls have this laugh, cry thing that makes it terrifying when they run at you. There's a consistent level of panic in Zombies Ate My Neighbors, and beyond the enemies, the shrill scream of the neighbors when you fail to rescue one of them isn't a sound you'll be forgetting anytime soon. And that's part of what makes the game interesting. You'll notice that for a game called Zombies Ate My Neighbors, the zombies wind up taking a back seat. They're the most basic enemy in the game and can be taken out with just a couple shots. And the weapons are one of the best parts of Zombies Ate My Neighbors. You have both a weapons inventory and a miscellaneous inventory. Weapons in this game include super soakers, soda cans, plates, tomatoes, bazookas, and way more, while power-ups are things like potions to transform or turn invisible, med kits, blow-up decoys. It's really impressive just how many different weapons and items there are. Zombies Ate My Neighbors also has several destructible environments with more than one way to take them down. For instance, you can get keys to open doors, or you can use the bazooka to blast a hole in the wall and get in that way, or punch the bejesus out of it as a big old monster. Of course, this doesn't work for every wall, but it's a nice touch. And it's all part of Zombies. Exploring. The goal is to rescue all the neighbors in each level, sure, but there's a bit of a risk and reward if you look around. Granted, it's not exactly fair that some cabinets will hold medkits and weapons, while others automatically hurt you and there's no way to distinguish between the two, but it's part of exploring. I mentioned earlier that Zombies is a pretty lengthy game, and indeed it is, one that you pretty much have to do in one shot. That might sound insane, and you might also say, even if I hadn't heard of this game before, I saw that shot of the title screen at the beginning, what's with that password screen right there? And you're right, the game does have a password system, and it's a pretty easy one to remember. But it has one flaw, and it's a pretty big one. By the time you get to the later levels, they're fairly challenging. You're going to need every potion, medkit, weapon, everything you've amassed to that point. The problem is that the password system saves absolutely none of that. Instead, you're given the default weapon of a Super Soaker and one medkit. Past, say, level 16, the passwords become useless. There are levels that require keys that you've gathered from previous levels or some sort of weapon to blast down doors and walls, and without those in your inventory, it's nearly impossible to proceed. At no point in the later levels does zombies hold back either. Right to the end, new enemies and traps are being thrown your way, which, while unique, feels almost overwhelming at times. With all these weapons at your disposal, you'd assume your option is just to take them all out. But LucasArts wasn't stupid. Of course a soda can isn't going to kill a giant mutant worm. And because of that, running is often your best bet, especially in the later levels. Your character is faster than most, if not all the enemies and zombies, and it's not just a viable option, it's sometimes the only one. Zombies has a theme of fight or flight, and this is obvious as soon as you see your default weapon does not have infinite ammo, and you have no backup attacks like a melee or something. Zombies Ate My Neighbors is far from a perfect game. The problems that plague it mean that most players are unlikely to ever truly finish it, without a lot of patience and willingness to learn. That being said, its goofy characters, catchy and eerie music, and fun gameplay make it a must-play. Between the two, I'd recommend the Super Nintendo version for the better music and graphics, but either way, you won't go wrong. Can't say the same about our neighbors, though.